This story delves into unsettling events and unexplained disappearances that some listeners may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Imagine a stillness so profound it hums, a silence that swallows the usual cacophony of a bustling port. It wasn't the quiet of a closed-down dock, but the eerie hush that descends when something fundamentally and possibly wrong has occurred. This was the silence that greeted Captain David Miller of the U.S. Coast Guard on a crisp autumn morning in Port Haven, Maine. Port Haven wasn't a massive international hub, but its deep water harbor was a vital artery for regional trade, especially for the endless flow of goods from the North Atlantic. David had seen it all in his 25 years on the water: rogue waves, engine failures, even the occasional lost fisherman pulled from the frigid depths. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for the sight that awaited him just past dawn on October 14th. It began subtly, as most true nightmares do. The night shift radar operator, a young man named Kevin O'Connell, whose primary concern was usually a misplaced lobster buoy or an overdue pleasure craft, noticed a blip. A significant blip. It was a container ship, the MV Siren's Call, registered out of Panama, heading steadily towards the main channel. Nothing unusual there. The Siren's Call was a regular visitor, known for its reliable schedule, ferrying containers of everything from electronics to frozen seafood. But Kevin noticed something else. The ship wasn't hailing port control. Not a single radio transmission. No requests for pilot assistance, no manifest declaration, no crew roster update. Just a silent, relentless presence on the radar, cutting through the swells. Kevin tried to raise them. He patched through on multiple frequencies, sent out urgent queries, his voice growing increasingly strained with each unanswered call. Static. Only static. David was just finishing his instant coffee, reviewing the day's patrol routes, when Kevin's frantic call came through. "Captain Miller, sir, it's the Siren's Call. She's not responding. And she's on track for Dock 7, but there's no one answering." David felt a prickle of unease. A ship of that size, moving under its own power without communication, was a serious breach of maritime protocol. It was also, frankly, terrifying. He barked orders, his calm exterior belying the knot of dread forming in his stomach. A Coast Guard cutter, the Guardian, was dispatched immediately, lights flashing, sirens wailing, slicing through the still morning waters. As the Guardian approached, the scale of the anomaly became horrifyingly clear. The Siren's Call was a ghost ship of the modern age. Her engines hummed with mechanical precision. Her navigation lights glowed. The massive vessel, almost 500 feet long, was slicing through the water at a steady 8 knots, perfectly on course. But through the binoculars, the Guardian's crew could see no one on the bridge. No one on deck. No figures moving in the morning light. The ship was a colossal, self-propelled enigma. David, now aboard the Guardian, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the bracing Atlantic air. He remembered old sailors' tales, the Mary Celeste, the Flying Dutchman. But this wasn't some ancient wooden vessel lost to time and superstition. This was a steel behemoth, bristling with 21st century technology, arriving in the modern world, under its own power, utterly deserted. The Guardian pulled alongside, its smaller frame dwarfed by the Siren's Call. David ordered a boarding party. 2 of his most experienced officers, Lieutenant Sarah Jenkins and Petty Officer Mark Peterson, prepared to make the perilous transfer. The ship's ladder was deployed, almost as if someone had lowered it just for them. Another impossible detail. Sarah and Mark, armed and cautious, were the first to step onto the deck of the Siren's Call. The silence that met them was profound, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the hull and the distant hum of the ship's powerful engines. David watched from the Guardian, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. "Clear on deck, Captain," Sarah's voice crackled over the radio, a strained whisper. No one in sight. They moved slowly, methodically, their boots echoing hollowly on the metal deck. The air was still, carrying the faint scent of diesel and salt. The ship was meticulously maintained, containers stacked neatly, ropes coiled, equipment stowed. It was a picture of perfect, mundane order, which only made the absence of its human element more chilling. They checked the bridge first. The door was unlocked. Inside, the navigation screens glowed, displaying the ship's current position, speed, and heading, all perfectly aligned for Port Haven. The autopilot was engaged. A half-empty mug of coffee sat on the console, still faintly warm to the touch. A logbook lay open, an entry for the previous day meticulously recorded, detailing weather conditions and cargo checks. It ended abruptly mid-sentence, the pen resting beside it. "Captain, you're not going to believe this." Mark's voice was tight with disbelief. "It's like everyone just vanished mid-task. They scoured the bridge, the radio room, the captain's quarters. Nothing. No signs of struggle. No forced entry. No alarms tripped. Everything was in its place, pristine, as if the crew had simply stepped out for a moment, expecting to return. But they hadn't. Next, the crew quarters. Each cabin was a snapshot of normal life. Unmade beds, clothes draped over chairs, personal photos tacked to bulkheads. A half-eaten plate of scrambled eggs sat on a mess hall table, a fork resting beside it. In one cabin, a novel lay face down on a bunk, a bookmark halfway through a chapter. In another, a razor sat on the edge of a sink, flecks of shaving cream still clinging to it. It wasn't a wreck. It wasn't a struggle. It was an evacuation that never happened, a disappearance without a trace. The ship was fully stocked with supplies, fuel, and cargo. There was no distress signal, no lifeboats missing, no indication of a fire or explosion. The entire crew, estimated at 22 souls, had simply ceased to exist on board the Siren's call. David Miller finally stepped onto the deck himself, the moment the Guardians secured the ship. He walked through the silent corridors, the empty mess hall, the desolate bridge. The warmth of the coffee mug, the open book, the half-eaten meal. These details weren't just strange. They were deeply, unsettlingly personal. They spoke of people who had been there moments ago, living, breathing, working. And then, without warning, they were gone. The engines continued their rhythmic thrum, the autopilot kept its course, and the Siren's call, a monument to the impossible, drifted silently into Port Haven. It was a ship that had brought its own terrifying mystery to shore, a question delivered on a wave of unsettling silence. Who were these people? What happened to them? And how could an entire crew vanish from a fully operational vessel without leaving a single clue? Just a perfectly preserved ghost ship sailing itself into port. The answer, David knew, would be far more disturbing than any storm or accident. This wasn't a natural disaster. This was something else entirely. He didn't need to be a seasoned detective to know that the pristine condition of the Orion, combined with the utter absence of its crew, screamed something far more sinister than a simple maritime mishap. This wasn't a wreck. This wasn't a mutiny, at least not in any way he understood the word. This was an impossible vanishing act, performed on a stage of open water, leaving behind only an empty set. David immediately contacted the Coast Guard. His voice, usually steady and calm, was laced with an urgency that even he hadn't anticipated. Within the hour, the harbor was a hive of activity. Flashing blue lights cut through the morning mist, reflecting off the placid water. Uniformed officers cordoned off the pier, keeping back the growing crowd of curious onlookers and news reporters who had somehow, already, caught wind of the unfolding enigma. Leading the initial investigation was Officer Thomas Miller, a man whose weathered face and sharp, observant eyes spoke of decades spent patrolling the unpredictable waters of the Atlantic. With him was Detective Sarah Jenkins, a local police detective known for her meticulous approach and a mind like a steel trap. They stood on the dock, grim-faced, staring up at the Orion, as if it held the answers etched onto its hull. "Harbor Master David Chun, I presume?" Miller's voice was gravelly, direct. "That's me, officer. And yes, she just sailed in. Like a phantom." David gestured vaguely towards the ship, still struggling to articulate the sheer unreality of it all. Sarah Jenkins, her gaze sweeping over the ship's perfectly coiled ropes and gleaming brass, interjected. "No distress calls, no collision reports, nothing on the radar from her? She just appeared." "Nothing," David confirmed, shaking his head. One moment, an empty stretch of water. The next, the Orion was drifting right into her berth on schedule, as if someone was at the helm guiding her in. Miller nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as he took in the details. "All right, let's get a team on board. We need to treat this as a potential crime scene. Jenkins, you're with me. David, can you give us a quick rundown of what you observed on your initial pass?" As David recounted his experience, the investigative team, a mix of Coast Guard personnel and forensic specialists, boarded the Orion. Each step on the gangplank felt heavy. Each creak of the ship's timbers echoed the profound silence that seemed to emanate from its very core. The air was still, carrying the faint scent of salt and diesel, but beneath it, an unsettling emptiness. The first impression upon boarding was one of profound normalcy. The deck was clean, gear was stowed, and there was no sign of struggle or disarray. It was as if the crew had simply decided to step off the ship mid-voyage and walk away. But where would they walk to in the middle of the ocean? Miller and Jenkins moved through the ship with a practiced precision, their eyes scanning every surface, every shadow. The bridge was their first stop. The navigation equipment was still powered on, glowing softly in the dim light filtering through the windows. The autopilot was engaged, set on a course directly for the harbor. The ship's logbook lay open on the chart table, a pen resting beside it. Jenkins carefully donned gloves and leaned closer to the log. Last entry. Course correction 0400 hours. Clear skies. All quiet. Signed by Captain Elias Thorne. She read aloud, her voice hushed. That was just a few hours ago. No indication of trouble. Miller pointed to a half-empty coffee mug still warm to the touch, sitting beside the logbook. Someone was here recently. Very recently. They moved down to the crew quarters. What they found there only deepened the mystery. Each bunk was neatly made, a few personal items, a paperback novel, a family photograph, a half-finished crossword puzzle, lay undisturbed on bedside tables. In the galley, a half-eaten breakfast was still on the table. A plate with scrambled eggs, a slice of toast, a mug with the dregs of coffee. It was as if the crew had been interrupted mid-meal, mid-life, and simply evaporated. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, no blood, no ransacking, Jenkins murmured, examining a locker that held a sailor's neatly folded clothes. It's like they just vanished into thin air. Miller ran a gloved hand along a bulkhead. No lifeboats missing. No emergency beacons activated. No signs of a fire, explosion, or even a sudden lurch. The vessel is immaculate. He looked back at Jenkins, a rare flicker of puzzlement in his usually impassive eyes. This isn't a shipwreck, Sarah. It's a magic trick. They continued their meticulous search, moving from the engine room, which hummed with the steady thrum of well-maintained machinery, to the cargo hold, which was full of its intended freight crates of electronics secured and untouched. Every compartment, every nook and cranny of the Orion was thoroughly searched. Yet the result was always the same. Perfect order, complete emptiness. The forensic team began their work, dusting for fingerprints, collecting samples, meticulously documenting every detail. They hoped for a stray hair, a forgotten piece of clothing, anything that could offer a clue. But the ship seemed to have been wiped clean, not by human hand, but by some invisible force that had taken only the living. David watched from the pier, the surreal scene unfolding before him. He had seen his share of strange occurrences in the harbor over the years. Smuggling operations, runaway boats, even a few tragic accidents. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for this. The Orion wasn't just a ship without a crew. It was a ship that defied logic, a vessel that had sailed itself into port like a silent, mocking testament to an impossible event. As the day wore on, the initial shock gave way to a chilling realization among the investigators. This wasn't a case of a missing person or even a group of missing people. This was a case of an entire crew, 7 souls, vanishing from a perfectly functioning vessel in the middle of a clear, calm sea, leaving behind no trace, no struggle, no explanation. Miller called a brief conference on the deck. All right, team. Here's what we have. 7 crew members, including Captain Elias Thorne, First Mate Michael Davis, and Engineer Jessica Riley, are gone. Ship's log shows routine operation until 0400. Autopilot was engaged. No distress calls, no emergency signals. All personal effects are on board. No signs of foul play, struggle, or damage to the vessel. It's like they simply stepped off the edge of the world. A young Coast Guard officer, fresh out of the academy, spoke up, his voice trembling slightly. But sir, how is that even possible? They can't just disappear. Miller's gaze was steely. That, son, is precisely what we need to figure out. Because if 7 experienced sailors can vanish without a trace from a ship like this, then we're dealing with something beyond any maritime incident report I've ever seen. Sarah Jenkins, usually composed, ran a hand through her hair. No evidence of a struggle means they either weren't struggling, or whatever happened was instantaneous. But instantaneous what? A sudden, perfectly coordinated jump overboard by 7 people? Unlikely. A mass hallucination? Also unlikely, and even if so, where are they now? The questions hung heavy in the salty air, each one more unsettling than the last. The Orion, once a symbol of routine commerce, had transformed into a silent monument to the inexplicable. The sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting long eerie shadows across the deck, making the untouched coffee cup on the bridge seem even more poignant, a frozen moment in time. David watched the investigators, their faces etched with a blend of determination and growing unease. He knew they were searching for a rational explanation, a logical sequence of events. But the deeper they delved into the Orion's silent mystery, the more apparent it became that logic had no place here. This ship had arrived in port not as a vessel of commerce, but as a messenger of the impossible, carrying a secret that whispered of a terror far greater than any storm. The disappearance of the crew wasn't just a riddle. It was a terrifying void, and David felt a cold dread seep into his bones, knowing that whatever filled that void would change everything. The realization hit David with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just a discovery, it was an unfolding nightmare. He stood on the deck of the Orion, the salty air suddenly feeling heavy, suffocating. The initial shock of finding the ship abandoned had given way to a chilling certainty that something profoundly wrong had occurred, something that defied all logic and conventional explanation. His mind raced, grasping for anchors of normalcy in a sea of impossible questions. He instinctively reached for his radio, his voice cracking as he relayed the grim update to Captain Miller. Miller, a man whose weathered face usually held an expression of stoic calm, arrived moments later, his brow furrowed with a mixture of concern and disbelief. He'd brought a small team of port security officers, their faces grim as they stepped aboard the silent vessel. The Orion loomed around them, a behemoth of steel and machinery, yet it felt utterly fragile, a shell waiting to crumble under the weight of its own unspoken horror. "No distress calls, no alarms, David?" Miller's voice was low, a stark contrast to the usual hustle of the port. David shook his head, his gaze sweeping across the deserted deck. "Nothing, Captain. Not a peep. It's like they just vanished into thin air. Every system I've checked so far seems operational." "Impossible," Miller muttered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his own mounting unease. "A ship this size, a full crew, they don't just vanish." They began a more systematic search, moving with a cautious reverence that bordered on dread. Each step echoed in the metallic corridors, amplifying the oppressive silence. The Orion was a modern marvel, equipped with state-of-the-art navigation and communication systems, designed to withstand the harshest elements. Yet it now felt like a tomb, perfectly preserved but utterly devoid of life. Their first stop was the bridge, the command center of any vessel. It was immaculate. The navigation console hummed softly, its screens displaying a clear, uneventful course. The radar showed only distant, innocuous blips. The captain's chair was neatly pushed in, a half-empty mug of lukewarm coffee still sitting on a side table. A logbook lay open, its last entry dated just hours before the Orion was spotted drifting. The handwriting was neat, routine. Approaching Port Sterling. Clear skies. All systems nominal. Eta 0600. There was no indication of trouble, no frantic scribbles, no sign of anything amiss. It was as if the crew had simply stood up and walked away in the middle of a perfectly ordinary watch. David ran his hand over the smooth surface of the console. "It's too quiet, Captain. Too orderly. If there was an emergency, a struggle, we'd see signs. Overturned chairs, spilled coffee, something." Miller nodded grimly. "Exactly. No forced entry, no signs of a fight. The emergency communication systems are intact. The lifeboats are all secured in their davits. There's no indication anyone even tried to abandon ship." They moved through the crew quarters, a series of compact cabins, each a snapshot of lives suddenly interrupted. Clothes lay folded on bunks, some half-packed, others as if just taken off. Wallets sat on nightstands, their contents undisturbed. Personal photos were tacked to bulkheads. Smiling families, beloved pets, scenic landscapes. A half-read paperback lay face down on a pillow in one cabin. An open bag of chips sat next to a gaming console in another. Dental floss hung from a mirror in a bathroom. It was a dizzying array of mundane details, each one screaming the same horrifying message. The crew had not anticipated leaving. They had not packed, they had not prepared. They had simply ceased to be there. In the galley, plates of half-eaten food sat on tables, plastic forks resting beside them. The smell of stale coffee and something vaguely like eggs hung in the air. A chessboard was set up in the recreation room, a game mid-play. The pieces stood frozen in their positions, a silent testament to a game that would never be finished. This wasn't a mutiny, David thought. Mutineers leave a mess, they leave a warning. This wasn't pirates. Pirates loot, they cause damage. This was nothing. An absence. A perfect, terrifying void. "Check the engine room," Miller ordered, his voice echoing through the silent ship. "See if there's any mechanical failure, anything that could have disabled them." David descended into the belly of the ship, the rhythmic hum of the engines a lonely heartbeat in the vast emptiness. The air was warm, thick with the smell of oil and metal. He moved through the labyrinthine passages, checking gauges, examining control panels. Everything was pristine. The engines were running perfectly, churning out power to the ship systems, maintaining its course. There were no alarms, no warning lights, no signs of overheating or malfunction. The Orion was a picture of mechanical perfection. Returning to the main deck, David found Miller examining the ship's manifest, a thick binder filled with inventory lists and crew details. 22 souls on board, Miller stated, his voice flat. Captain Robert Peterson, First Mate Sarah Jenkins. A full, experienced crew. All accounted for on paper, all gone in reality. David peered over his shoulder. Any unusual cargo? Miller shook his head. Standard container freight. Consumer goods, electronics. Nothing out of the ordinary. No hazardous materials, no special shipments. They spent the next several hours meticulously searching every inch of the Orion, from the highest mast to the deepest bilge. They found nothing. No note, no message scrawled on a wall, no personal item that seemed out of place or indicative of distress. It was as if the ship had been magically wiped clean of its human occupants, leaving only their ghosts in the form of untouched belongings and half-finished tasks. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a heavy sense of defeat settled over them. The initial adrenaline had worn off, replaced by a gnawing frustration. David stood on the bridge once more, staring out at the darkening ocean. The ship's automated systems continued their monotonous work, oblivious to the profound mystery they embodied. Then something caught his eye. On the navigation console, a small blinking light. It was an indicator for a secondary, rarely used sensor array, typically deployed only for deep-sea mapping or highly specialized research. It wasn't part of the standard commercial shipping protocols. Curious, David tapped the screen. A series of complex readings filled the display, data streams he didn't immediately recognize. He zoomed in, trying to make sense of the intricate graphs and numerical sequences. "What is that?" Miller asked, stepping up beside him. "I'm not sure, Captain," David admitted, his brow furrowing. "It's a specialized hydroacoustic sensor. It looks like it was activated and recording data for the past few days. But why? This ship isn't equipped for research. And these readings," he paused, his finger tracing a particularly jagged peak on one of the graphs. "These aren't normal oceanographic data. They're too regular, too rhythmic." He pulled up the ship's previous logs, cross-referencing the sensor's activation with the Orion's reported course. The sensor had been switched on approximately 3 days prior, right when the ship had entered a notoriously deep and isolated trench far out in the Pacific, a region known as the Mariana Trench Extension. A shiver ran down David's spine despite the warmth of the bridge. Who would activate such a sensor, and why in such an obscure location on a cargo ship? He continued to scroll through the data, his heart beginning to pound with a new, unsettling rhythm. The reading showed an intensely powerful, low-frequency acoustic signature. It wasn't a whale song or tectonic activity, or anything he recognized from his years of studying marine phenomena. It was something else, something pulsing, and it had been consistently present, growing stronger, right up until the point the crew disappeared. The last recorded pulse was just moments before the final log entry, just before the silence descended. David felt a cold dread seep into his bones, knowing that whatever filled that void would change everything. The missing crew wasn't just a riddle. It was a terrifying void, and now he had found a whisper of what might have filled it. A whisper from the deep, a sound that should not exist. A secret that had somehow silenced 22 souls and left an impossible ghost ship drifting into port. The silence that followed the recording was a different kind of terror. It wasn't the absence of sound, it was the chilling echo of what had been there, a phantom vibration in the very air around David. He sat frozen in the captain's chair, the headphones still clamped to his ears, the faint hiss of the empty audio track now deafening. He pressed replay, his fingers trembling. It was there again. That deep, resonant pulse. Not a hum, not a thrum, but a slow, deliberate beat. It was too low to be easily heard, but he felt it, a pressure behind his eyes, a strange resonance in his chest that seemed to synchronize with the sound. It was like the heartbeat of something impossibly vast, impossibly ancient, and profoundly alien. He closed his eyes, trying to make sense of it, to categorize it. Was it a mechanical fault? A structural vibration? No. It had a shape, a complex harmonic structure that whispered of design, not accident. It was intricate, evolving subtly with each pulse. David pulled off the headphones, rubbing his temples. His mind raced, trying to reconcile this impossible data with everything he knew about the world. A sound that had no right to exist, recorded on a ship that had no right to be empty. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he had stumbled onto something far grander and far more terrifying than a simple maritime mystery. This wasn't a crime scene. It was an archaeological dig into the unknown. He spent the next few hours in a feverish frenzy, poring over the audio file. He ran spectral analyses, trying to isolate frequencies to map the waveform. The results were perplexing. The primary frequency was indeed extremely low, bordering on infrasound, the kind of sound that can induce feelings of unease, dread, or even physical discomfort in humans. But layered within it were higher harmonics, subtle distortions that seemed to shift and change, almost like a language without words. It wasn't random noise. It was structured. The more he analyzed, the more a profound sense of isolation settled over him. Who would believe him? How could he even begin to explain this? He thought of Jessica, his colleague, her sharp, skeptical mind. She was brilliant with data, meticulous and grounded. If anyone could help him make sense of this, it was her. But how do you present a ghost's heartbeat to a scientist? He decided on caution. He couldn't afford to be dismissed as delusional. He extracted a short, clean segment of the audio, just enough to capture the essence of the pulsing sound, and created a secure, encrypted file. He drafted an email to Jessica, carefully choosing his words. He focused on objective facts. Peculiar audio anomaly discovered in Odyssey's system logs. Extremely low frequency, complex harmonics. Appears to be correlated with the period just prior to crew disappearance. Could you run a full spectral and waveform analysis? I'm curious if it matches any known acoustic signatures, natural or artificial. He kept his personal feelings, his mounting dread, out of it. He needed her unbiased scientific assessment. While waiting for her response, David shifted his focus to other logs from the Odyssey. If this sound was capable of silencing 22 souls, what other traces might it have left? He dove into the ship's power logs, navigation data, environmental sensor readings, anything and everything that recorded the ship's internal state. He was looking for anything unusual, any deviation from the norm that might coincide with the disappearance. Hours blurred into an exhausting search. The ship's systems were robust, redundant, designed to withstand the harshest conditions. Most readings were normal, mundane. Then he found it. Tucked away in the auxiliary system diagnostics, under minor electrical interference, was a series of small but consistent power fluctuations. They weren't significant enough to trigger major alarms, just brief, almost imperceptible dips and surges in the power supply to the ship's deep-sea sensor array. The timing, however, was chillingly precise. These fluctuations began approximately 30 minutes before the last recorded communication from the crew, and continued intermittently for roughly an hour. David's breath hitched. The deep-sea sensor array. It was designed to detect anomalies, seismic activity, unusual marine life, and even subsurface structures in the abyssal depths. It was the Odyssey's eyes and ears into the very environment from which that impossible sound seemed to emanate. Could the sound, this low-frequency pulse, have been interacting with the sensor array? Was it causing these fluctuations? Or worse, was it coming from or being amplified by the array itself? He cross-referenced the timings. The power fluctuations in the deep-sea sensor array started just moments before the earliest recording of the mysterious pulse he had found. It suggested a terrifying sequence of events. First, the interaction with the deep-sea sensors, then the sound itself appearing in the ship's internal audio logs, and finally, the complete disappearance of the crew. It was a chain reaction, a silent, invisible assault. Just as this chilling hypothesis began to solidify in his mind, his comms unit buzzed. It was Jessica. Her voice, usually calm and measured, held a distinct edge of bewilderment. "David, what in the world did you send me?" she began without preamble. "I've run every analysis program I have, and I'm frankly stumped. This isn't just peculiar. This is unprecedented." David felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. "Unprecedented how, Jessica?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "The frequency profile is unlike anything I've ever seen," she explained, her voice quickening with professional intrigue and underlying unease. "It's an ultra-low frequency, almost infrasonic, but it carries incredibly complex harmonic overtones. They shift in a non-random, almost intelligent pattern. It's not mechanical. It's not geological. It doesn't match any known biological signatures, either. It's too structured, too deliberate for natural phenomena, yet it has an organic fluidity to it. And the energy levels, they're surprisingly high for something so low frequency, almost as if it's being generated with immense power." She paused, and David could almost hear her mind whirring. "It's like a heartbeat, David," she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "A very slow, very deep, incredibly powerful heartbeat. But it's not from any creature we know. Feels resonant, like it's designed to vibrate at a very specific frequency, to interact with something." David felt a surge of validation mixed with profound dread. "Jessica," he said, his voice barely audible, "I think it was interacting with something. Specifically, the Odyssey-S deep-sea sensor array." He quickly explained his findings about the power fluctuations, the timing, the correlation. He laid out the terrifying hypothesis that had taken root in his mind, that this sound, this impossible pulse, wasn't just a byproduct of some unknown phenomenon. It was an active agent. Jessica was silent for a long moment, the hum of the comms line the only sound between them. When she finally spoke, her voice was grave. "If what you're suggesting is true, David, if this sound, this thing, was capable of directly interfering with the ship's systems through its deep-sea sensors, essentially disabling or manipulating them, then the crew didn't just vanish. They were silenced. And whatever did it, used the ship's own technology against it." The full weight of their discovery settled heavily in the air. The whisper from the deep was no longer just a cryptic sound. It was a weapon, a signature of an unknown entity, an impossible force that had reached out from the crushing darkness of the ocean depths, seized a state-of-the-art vessel, and erased its entire crew without a trace. The ship wasn't just empty. It was a tomb, and the killer had left its calling card, a pulse of dread resonating from the abyss. The mystery had just transformed into an existential threat. The mystery had just transformed into an existential threat. The initial shockwave had subsided, replaced by a chilling realization that reverberated through every level of authority. This wasn't just a maritime incident. It was an impossible crime, a phantom strike that defied all known explanations. Local port authorities, overwhelmed and out of their depth, quickly deferred to federal agencies. The FBI's Major Incidents Response Team, a unit typically deployed for high-profile terrorist threats or complex, multi-state criminal enterprises, was called in. Their most seasoned investigator, Special Agent Sarah Chun, was put in charge. Sarah Chun wasn't easily rattled. Her career was a mosaic of the strange, the brutal, and the utterly baffling. From the cryptic disappearances in the Alaskan wilderness to the improbable heist of a national museum, she had seen humanity's darkest corners and its most ingenious deceptions. But standing on the pier, staring up at the titanic hull of the Odyssey, she felt a cold knot tightening in her stomach. The ship, a gleaming testament to modern engineering, sat there like a perfectly preserved ghost, its emptiness a palpable weight. Her first steps onto the gangway felt like an intrusion into a forbidden space. The air was still, thick with the smell of brine and dormant machinery. The Odyssey was a leviathan designed to carry hundreds of souls across vast oceans. Yet now it swallowed the sounds of the bustling port in Sarah's own footsteps, leaving only an oppressive silence in its wake. The Coast Guard had already secured the vessel, meticulously sweeping for any signs of sabotage or struggle. They'd found nothing. No forced entry. No signs of a fight. No blood. No distress calls. No lifeboats missing. Nothing. Just an empty ship, sailing itself into port, as if its crew had simply ceased to be. Sarah began her methodical ascent to the bridge, her team fanning out to secure and photograph every inch of the vessel. The sheer scale of the Odyssey made the absence of its crew even more profound. Every cabin door was unlocked, every locker intact. Personal effects lay undisturbed. A half-finished crossword puzzle on a mess hall table, a paperback novel face down on a bunk, a coffee mug still stained with the morning's brew in the galley. It was as if the ship's inhabitants had been plucked from existence in a single instantaneous moment, leaving behind only the mundane echoes of their lives. On the bridge, the scene was eerily pristine. The sophisticated navigation systems glowed softly, indicating the ship had been on autopilot, maintaining its course with unwavering precision. The last entry in the digital logbook was from Captain Robert Maxwell, a seasoned mariner with an impeccable record. It read, 0700 Zulu, clear skies, calm seas, ETA Port Everglades 1800 Zulu, all systems nominal, crew performing routine checks. Maxwell out. That was it. No anomalies, no concerns, no indication of anything amiss. The log then simply stopped. Not an error, not a power failure, but an abrupt, silent cessation, as if the captain himself had vanished mid-sentence, his finger hovering over the enter key. Sarah's eyes scanned the console, her gaze lingering on a small, framed photograph tucked beside a monitor. Captain Maxwell smiling, arm around a woman and two young children. A family waiting at home, now faced with an unimaginable void. She felt a flicker of the human tragedy beneath the impossible mystery. This wasn't just a riddle. It was a mass disappearance. A collective vanishing act that defied every logical explanation in her playbook. The chief engineer, David Miller, a man known for his meticulous attention to detail, had left his station in the engine room just as immaculately. Tools were hung on their racks. A half-eaten sandwich sat on a workbench, covered with plastic wrap, as if Miller fully intended to return. First mate Emily Hayes's quarters were equally undisturbed. A neatly folded uniform on her bed, a charging tablet beside it. The crew manifest, which Sarah now held, listed 35 names, each representing a life, a family, a story. 35 people, gone without a trace, from a vessel that was a fortress of steel and advanced technology. The calling card the previous investigators had sensed wasn't a physical object, Sarah realized, but the very nature of the disappearance. It was the absolute, unblemished perfection of the void. No struggle, no forced entry, no signs of a fight, no distress calls, no missing lifeboats. It was the complete absence of evidence that screamed of an unnatural event. This wasn't a crime of passion or profit. This was something else entirely. Something that transcended human capability. Later that evening, back on the pier, the enormity of the situation began to settle in. Sarah stood with her lead forensic specialist, Dr. Ben Carter, a man whose calm demeanor usually belied the grisly realities he encountered. But even Ben looked shaken. "We've swept every inch, Agent Chan," Ben reported, his voice low. "No prints that don't belong to the crew or the initial response teams. No foreign biologicals, no chemical residue, no radiation spikes. The food in the galley, the water in the tanks, everything is clean. The ship's internal security cameras? They're all operational, running, recording. But they show nothing. Just empty corridors, empty decks. It's like the crew was never there. Or they edited themselves out of existence." Sarah stared out at the dark ocean. The Odyssey a colossal shadow against the moonlit water. They had to have been there, Ben. Their personal effects, their logs, the fact the ship sailed itself into port. They were there, and then they weren't. What about the last few hours of surveillance footage? Anything unusual leading up to the cessation of the log? Ben shook his head, looking utterly perplexed. That's the most disturbing part. The footage is continuous, no breaks, no tampering. It shows crew members moving about, performing their duties, right up until about an hour before Captain Maxwell's last log entry. Then the next frame, nothing. Just empty decks. Not a blur, not a flash, no sign of struggle, no one running. They just vanished. Mid-step, mid-conversation. It's like a colossal edit, but the files are pristine. No digital manipulation detected. A cold dread seeped into Sarah's bones. This wasn't a simple case of missing persons. This was an affront to logic, a violation of the natural order. The Odyssey was a testament to humanity's mastery over the seas, a hub of bustling life and cutting-edge technology. Yet, something had boarded it or emerged from within it, and erased its entire crew without a trace. The ship wasn't just empty. It was a tomb, and the killer had left its calling card, a pulse of dread resonating from the abyss. The mystery had just transformed into an existential threat, and Sarah Chun, for the first time in her career, felt a chilling certainty that whatever had happened on the Odyssey was unlike anything she had ever encountered, something that whispered of forces beyond human comprehension. The implications were staggering, terrifying. If it could happen to an entire crew on a state-of-the-art vessel, what was to stop it from happening anywhere else? The Odyssey wasn't just a crime scene, it was a warning. The Odyssey wasn't just a crime scene, it was a warning. And the government, acutely aware of the potential for mass panic, moved with unprecedented speed. The ship was immediately quarantined, a perimeter established miles offshore, cloaked in a veil of official secrecy. A joint task force, an alphabet soup of federal agencies, FBI, Coast Guard, NOAA, along with top maritime investigators and forensic specialists, descended upon the vessel. Their mission: find answers and, if possible, contain the truth. Leading the FBI's contingent was Special Agent Sarah Miller, a veteran of countless complex investigations, from high-profile kidnappings to intricate corporate espionage. Sarah was known for her unshakable logic and her ability to cut through noise to find the core truth. But as she stepped onto the deserted deck of the Odyssey, a cold dread, unfamiliar and unsettling, began to settle in her stomach. This wasn't a case for fingerprints and motives. This was something else entirely. The initial sweep of the ship was methodical, exhaustive. Every cabin, every galley, every engine room, every inch of the 12 decks was meticulously searched. The forensics teams, usually a flurry of activity, moved with a quiet, almost bewildered efficiency. There were no signs of a struggle. None. No overturned furniture, no broken glass, no telltale scuff marks on the pristine floors. The only disturbance was the gentle sway of the ship, the distant clang of metal, and the eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. Personal effects were found scattered exactly as their owners had left them. Wallets with cash and IDs sat on nightstands. Phones were plugged into chargers, displaying forgotten notifications. Half-eaten meals remained on tables in the crew mess hall, forks resting beside plates. Books lay open, marking a paused story. It was as if, in a single synchronized moment, every single person had simply ceased to exist, leaving their lives frozen in time. The medical bay was empty, the bridge deserted, the lifeboats still secured in their davits. There was no distress call, no emergency beacon activated, no sign of any attempt to abandon ship. Sarah walked through the deserted corridors, the silence amplifying the sound of her own footsteps. Her rational mind desperately sought an explanation. A highly organized, sophisticated piracy operation? But what was the motive? The Odyssey was a luxury cruise liner, not a cargo ship laden with valuables. And even the most ruthless pirates would leave some kind of evidence, some sign of their presence. A mutiny? Unlikely, given the lack of any internal strife reported in the crew logs. And again, no physical evidence. A mass casualty event? A sudden undetectable toxin? But then where were the bodies? Where were the signs of illness or panic? The ship's advanced technological systems offered little more clarity. The navigation log showed an uneventful journey, a steady course, until the precise moment the ship drifted off course, seemingly on autopilot, towards Port Miami. There were no anomalies in the engine performance, no power surges or failures. The communication logs were equally baffling. The last outgoing message was a routine weather report sent hours before the disappearance. After that, nothing. Just silence. The ship's internal and external cameras, a sophisticated network designed to monitor every corner of the vessel, were fully operational. This, everyone agreed, would be the key. Weeks turned into a grueling month. The task force worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and a growing sense of desperation. The public was growing restless, demanding answers. The official story remained vague. An ongoing investigation into a significant maritime incident. But the whispers had begun, fueled by leaked photos of the empty ship and the unsettling lack of information. Tales of ghost ships and curses, of ancient oceanic forces, started to spread like wildfire. Sarah, however, clung to logic. She spent days, then weeks, in the cramped, airless forensic lab, poring over the security camera footage. Frame by painstaking frame, she watched the last moments of the Odyssey's crew. She saw Captain Robert "Rob" Hayes, a seasoned mariner, laughing with his first officer on the bridge. She watched Chef David Chun meticulously plating a gourmet meal in the galley. She saw Emily Rodriguez, a young stewardess, tidying a cabin, humming softly to herself. Normal, mundane, everyday life. Then, at precisely 2:17 a.m. on the night of the disappearance, across every single camera feed, something happened. It wasn't a glitch, not a static burst, but a subtle, almost imperceptible flicker. A momentary distortion like a ripple across water, or a brief, localized tear in the fabric of reality itself. It lasted for less than a tenth of a second, barely noticeable at normal playback speed. But when isolated and magnified, it was undeniably there. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. And with it, so was the crew. One frame showed Emily Rodriguez placing a pillow on a bed. The next, after the flicker, the room was empty. The pillow was still in the same position. The bed undisturbed. No blur, no shadow, no indication of movement. Just gone. The same phenomenon occurred across all active cameras. Captain Hayes on the bridge, the chef in the galley, the security guard patrolling a corridor. All were present in the frame before the flicker, and utterly absent in the frame immediately after. It was as if they had been digitally erased. Initial theories from the technical experts ranged from a highly advanced, coordinated EMP burst that somehow targeted biological matter, to an unprecedented power surge. But the ship's systems logs showed no such events. The power grid remained stable. The cameras, though recording the event, were otherwise unaffected. The distortion was localized to the image of the crew members, not the camera itself. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This wasn't a technical malfunction. This was an event, a phenomenon. She watched the flicker again, her eyes straining, trying to find any detail, any anomaly within that fleeting fraction of a second. It was like a key turning in a lock, but she couldn't see the key, only the effect. Then came the report from Dr. Ben Carter, a brilliant but eccentric astrophysicist brought in by NOAA to analyze any potential atmospheric or electromagnetic anomalies. He'd been meticulously scanning the ship, not for conventional evidence, but for anything that defied explanation. His voice, usually calm and academic, held a tremor of disbelief. "Agent Miller," he'd said, his glasses pushed up his nose, "we've detected a persistent, low-level energy signature emanating from the ship's core. It's not electrical, not magnetic, not thermal in any known spectrum. Something else. It fluctuates erratically, almost rhythmically, and peaks precisely when we cross-reference it with the time of the crew's disappearance." He paused, his eyes wide. "It's like nothing I've ever recorded. It's almost as if the ship itself is vibrating on a frequency we can barely perceive, and that frequency intensified." Sarah stared at the flicker on the screen, then at Dr. Carter's bewildered face. The energy signature, the flicker, the synchronized disappearance. A terrifying, impossible hypothesis began to form in her mind, a realization that turned her blood to ice. They weren't looking for a criminal or even a disaster. They were facing an event that defied the known laws of physics. The Odyssey hadn't just lost its crew. It had been touched by something fundamentally alien, something that could erase existence in the blink of an eye. And the question was no longer who or what, but how could such a thing be possible? And the question was no longer who or what, but how could such a thing be possible? Dr. Eris Thorne, his face etched with a combination of exhaustion and a terrifying dawning realization, stood before the holographic projection of the Odysseus bridge. The absence of the crew was no longer just a mystery. It was an affront to every known law of physics. His team, a collection of brilliant minds from various disciplines, had spent days sifting through every atom, every energy signature, every microfracture on the ship. They found nothing. No trace of struggle, no blood, no foreign DNA, no residue of any known weapon or substance. It was as if the very concept of these individuals had been surgically excised from reality. "We've run every diagnostic, every scan imaginable," Eris began, his voice raspy from lack of sleep, addressing Agent Miller and Captain Rostova in the makeshift command center set up in the port hangar. "We've looked for conventional disappearances, abduction, teleportation, even disintegration. What we found is none of those things." Captain Rostova, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed in a mixture of skepticism and profound unease, finally spoke. "Then what did you find, Doctor? Because from where I stand, you're telling me 37 people vanished into thin air without a trace." Eris nodded slowly, his gaze drifting back to the holographic ship. Precisely. But thin air implies a void. What we have here is something more absolute. Consider the energy readings. There was a massive, localized energy spike recorded by the ship's internal systems, a spike that defies classification, unlike anything we've ever cataloged. It wasn't kinetic, it wasn't thermal, it wasn't electromagnetic in any conventional sense. It was an event. He paused, letting the word hang in the air, weighted with unspoken implications. My team, specifically Dr. Lena Hansen, our quantum chemist, made a critical discovery just hours ago. On the bridge, in the captain's chair, where Captain Elias Vance was presumably sitting, there's a microscopic anomaly in the molecular structure of the chair's synthetic fabric. It's not damage, not a stain. It's a minute, almost undetectable distortion, like a ripple in solid matter. Agent Miller leaned forward, his usual contained demeanor now showing genuine concern. A distortion? What does that mean, Eris? It means, Eris continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, that at the precise point where Captain Vance's body would have been, the very fabric of space-time on a quantum level appears to have undergone a momentary hyperlocalized collapse. Not a hole, not a tear, but an unraveling. Lena compared it to trying to untangle a knot in a rope, only to find that the individual strands themselves have simply ceased to exist at that specific point. The silence in the room was thick, punctuated only by the hum of the computers. Captain Rostova finally broke it, her voice barely audible. Are you saying they were erased? Eris turned to her, his eyes hollow. Not just erased, Captain. Their fundamental existence, their very constituent particles, appear to have been unmade. It's as if their quantum states were momentarily destabilized to such an extreme that they simply weren't. The energy signature we detected? We hypothesize it was the energy required to facilitate this impossible uncreation. Miller stood up, pacing agitatedly. Uncreation? Eris, that's science fiction. That's beyond anything we understand. Exactly, Eris agreed, a grim satisfaction in his tone. And that's why we must consider it. What if the Odyssey wasn't just a victim of an unknown force but a testbed? What if it encountered something that represents a technology or a natural phenomenon so advanced, so utterly alien, that it operates on principles we can barely conceive? Dr. Lena Hansen, a petite woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, entered the room carrying a tablet. Eris is right, Agent Miller. We're detecting similar, though even fainter, quantum distortions in other areas of the ship. The galley, the engine room, the crew quarters. Always in locations where the crew's manifests indicated personnel were present at the time of the event. It's like a ghostly echo of their former existence, a footprint made by their sudden, absolute non-existence. So what caused it? Rostova pressed, her face pale. Was it something on the ship? Or something outside? Eris gestured to the holographic projection. That's the terrifying question. The Odyssey itself shows no signs of external impact. No plasma burns, no scorch marks, no conventional damage. Whatever happened within or to the ship's internal environment. We've theorized several possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. He walked over to a whiteboard and began sketching complex diagrams. One theory: a highly localized, naturally occurring space-time anomaly. A microscopic wormhole, perhaps, or a quantum entanglement cascade that somehow reached critical mass. But the energy required for such an event, and its specific targeting of organic matter, is unprecedented. Targeting organic matter? Miller interjected sharply. You mean it only affected the crew? As far as we can tell, Lena confirmed. The ship systems, the food in the pantry, the clothing in the lockers, all perfectly intact. Only the biological entities, the crew members, were affected. This suggests either a highly specific natural phenomenon, or an intelligent application of this uncreation process. Eris continued, his voice gaining a frantic edge. Which leads to the second, more disturbing theory. This was a deliberate act. A weapon or a tool of immense power, capable of manipulating reality at its most fundamental level. Imagine a device that doesn't kill, doesn't destroy, but simply undoes existence. A localized reality fracture that pulls beings out of our dimension, not into another, but into nothingness. Captain Rostova visibly shuddered. Nothingness? That's worse than death. Indeed, Eris said gravely, and the implications are staggering. If such a technology exists, or if such a natural phenomenon can be triggered, then our understanding of life, death, and reality itself is fundamentally flawed. Agent Miller, his eyes scanning the detailed readouts on Lena's tablet, spoke with a new urgency. If it's a weapon, then we need to understand who wields it and why. If it's a natural phenomenon, then we need to understand how to predict it and how to stop it from happening again. Is there any indication that this uncreation event is still active on the Odyssey? Is there any risk to us being on board? Eris and Lena exchanged a look. That's another area of intense concern, Eris admitted. While the primary energy spike was instantaneous and brief, we are detecting extremely faint, residual energy signatures. They're almost imperceptible, like the lingering heat from a fire that burned out long ago. But they are there. And according to Lena's latest models, these signatures are gradually, infinitesimally dissipating. It's like the ship itself is slowly recovering from the event, or rather, the residual quantum distortions are settling. But is it safe? Miller pressed again, his voice firm. We believe so, Lena replied, though her voice lacked absolute conviction. The energy levels are orders of magnitude below anything that could trigger another event. But we don't understand the mechanism. We don't know what initiated it in the first place. Was it a specific environmental condition? A frequency? A material? We're essentially inside the epicenter of an event we don't comprehend, trying to reverse engineer a process that defies known physics. Eris walked back to the holographic display of the Odyssey, his hand reaching out as if to touch the spectral image. What truly haunts me, Agent Miller, is the lack of why. If it was a weapon, there's no message, no claim of responsibility, no sign of an attacker. If it was a natural phenomenon, why here? Why now? And why only the crew, leaving the ship perfectly intact? A silent, mocking monument to an impossible tragedy. He turned to face them, his expression grim. The Odyssey is more than just a ghost ship. It's a fundamental challenge to our reality. It's proof that there are forces or intelligences capable of manipulating the very fabric of existence. And the chilling implication, the terrifying question that keeps me awake at night, is this: if they could unmake 37 people without a trace, what else could they unmake? And what if the Odyssey isn't just a crime scene but a dormant trigger? What if the lingering energy, however faint, is merely waiting for the right conditions to reactivate, to spread, to consume not just a crew but an entire world? The thought hung in the air, a cold, inescapable dread settling over them. The Odyssey, once a symbol of human ingenuity, had become a harbinger of a reality far more fragile and terrifying than anyone had ever dared to imagine. And as the residual energy dissipated, ever so slowly, the question shifted once more. Were they just studying a catastrophe, or were they living on borrowed time, unknowingly standing on the precipice of another, far greater unraveling? The air, thick with a metallic tang and the ghost of an impossible heat, slowly began to cool. The ringing in their ears, a persistent high-pitched shriek that had vibrated through bone and nerve, softened to a dull hum, then faded into the oppressive silence of the open ocean. Michael felt a strange lightness in his limbs, a disorientation that wasn't quite dizziness but a profound sense of having been momentarily unmoored from reality. He grasped the railing, his knuckles white, and tried to steady his breathing, the acrid scent of ozone still stinging his nostrils. Jessica, her face pale beneath a sheen of sweat, stared wide-eyed at her spectral analyzer. The screen, which moments ago had flared with an overload of incomprehensible data, now displayed a series of intricate, almost artistic waveforms. It's not residual energy, she whispered, her voice barely audible, thick with disbelief. It's a signature, a pattern. It's like a complex harmonic sequence. I've never seen anything like it. It's too organized to be random, too intricate to be natural interference. She zoomed in on a section, her finger trembling as she traced a series of interwoven frequencies. And look at this. There's a repeating element. A primary frequency, almost like a carrier wave, and then these layered modulations. It's structured. David, equally shaken, ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting from Jessica's screen to the dark, silent hulking form of the Orion's call. His own equipment, a sophisticated array of thermal and acoustic sensors, was now displaying a faint, flickering anomaly deep within the ship's primary cargo hold. Just check this out, he called, his voice tight. My thermal imager is picking up a hot spot. Not a fire, not electrical. It's almost like a warmth, a metabolic signature, but it's too diffuse, too large to be a single entity. And it's moving. Slowly. deep inside the keel, near the engine room, but also radiating upwards into the main cargo bays. He adjusted a dial, trying to refine the image. It's not consistent. It's almost like something is pulsing, like a giant silent heart beating just beneath the decks. Emily, who had been standing utterly still, her gaze fixed on the ship's bridge where the energy had seemed to coalesce, finally spoke. Her voice was calm, almost unnervingly so, a stark contrast to the barely contained panic in Michael's own chest. The ancient texts, the myths of the sea, they often speak of ships becoming sentient, not through magic but through a kind of imprinting, a culmination of human will, fear, intent, or exposure to forces beyond our understanding. They become conduits, vessels for something greater or darker than themselves. She turned to Jessica, her eyes alight with a disturbing realization. Jessica, that carrier wave you mentioned, is there a chance it's a resonant frequency? Something that could amplify certain energies, or even reorganize matter? Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool ocean air. Reorganize matter, Emily? What are you suggesting? That this ship isn't just empty but that it's alive? Or worse, that it's becoming something else? He looked at the vast, dark vessel, no longer just a mystery, but a looming active threat. The previous understanding, that they were investigating a tragic event, had shattered. Now they were standing before something that was actively happening. Not necessarily alive in the biological sense, Emily clarified, her brow furrowed in thought, but a localized distortion, a nexus point. If the energy surge was a manifestation of whatever caused the crew's disappearance, then it wasn't just an echo, it was a recharge, a power-up. And if Jessica's detecting a structured signature, and David's seeing something moving or pulsing within the hull, then the ship itself might be undergoing a transformation. The unraveling isn't just a metaphor for the crew's fate, Michael. It might be happening to the ship itself, or to the very fabric of reality around it. Jessica nodded slowly, her fingers still dancing over the analyzer. Emily might be onto something. This primary frequency, it's incredibly stable, almost unnaturally so. And it's persistent. It hasn't faded. It's active. It's almost like the ship is now broadcasting it. And the modulations, they're complex. Like information. Like a language we don't understand. A language. David scoffed, trying to inject some normalcy into the terrifying scenario. Come on, Jess. It's energy. It's physics. Not a message. But even as he said it, his conviction wavered. The anomalous thermal signature within the ship was now showing a slight expansion, a creeping warmth spreading through the metal. His sonar, which had initially picked up a structural anomaly, was now registering a subtle, almost rhythmic vibration, deep within the Orion's call-S keel. It wasn't the hum of machinery. It was something else. Michael stared at the ship, a cold dread seeping into his bones. Okay, we need to go back in. We need to find the source of this carrier wave, this pulsing warmth. David, can you pinpoint the strongest point of that thermal signature? David hesitated. It's diffuse, Michael. Like I said, it's radiating. But the core seems to be in the engine room, and then spreading through the main cargo hold, specifically Cargo Bay 3. It's almost like it's using the ship's structure to propagate. Cargo Bay 3, Emily murmured, her eyes distant. That's where we found the initial anomalies. The strange residue, the faint energy readings before the surge. All right, Michael said, his voice firm, pushing down the rising tide of fear. David, you'll lead the way with your thermal imager. Jess, you keep monitoring that frequency. See if it changes as we get closer. Emily, your insights are critical. Keep thinking, keep looking for patterns. We're going back to Cargo Bay 3. We need to understand what this ship is becoming, before it becomes something we can't stop. As they prepared to reboard the Orion's call, the air grew colder, the silence deeper. The water around the ship, previously calm, now seemed to ripple with an unseen current, creating faint concentric circles that spread outward from the hull. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Michael noticed it. The ship was no longer just a static object in the water. It was influencing its environment. Stepping back onto the gangplank felt different this time. The metal groaned beneath their weight, a sound that seemed less like aged steel and more like a sigh. The air inside the ship was still and heavy, but now it carried a faint, almost imperceptible metallic tang, a smell that reminded Michael of a freshly struck match, or perhaps something even older, something elemental and raw. They moved with renewed caution, David's thermal imager providing a ghostly, shifting map of the ship's interior. The faint, warm glow on his screen, indicating the anomalous energy, was now undeniably brighter, more defined, coalescing into a series of interconnected nodes within the cargo bay. Jessica's analyzer, meanwhile, showed the carrier wave strengthening, its complex modulations growing more pronounced, almost as if the ship itself was reacting to their presence, broadcasting its language more forcefully. As they reached the entrance to Cargo Bay 3, the air grew noticeably warmer, a dry, almost arid heat that seemed to suck the moisture from their lips. The heavy steel door, which had been stubbornly jammed on their previous visit, now stood ajar by a few inches, a sliver of darkness visible within. Michael exchanged a look with the others, a silent question passing between them. No one had touched it since their last visit. David raised his imager. The core signature is right inside, Michael. Strongest point. It's almost radiating heat now. And the rhythmic vibration I detected from the keel? It's much louder here. It's like a deep thrumming, a low-frequency hum that you feel more than you hear. Emily peered into the opening, her face grim. It's like the ship is breathing. A slow, deep inhalation and exhalation. Michael pushed the door open further, revealing the cavernous, dimly lit cargo bay. The emergency lights they had set up on their last visit were still faintly glowing, casting long, distorted shadows. But something was different. The stacked containers, previously haphazard and covered in grime, now seemed cleaner. The rust and decay that had coated everything was subtly receding in places, replaced by an unnerving sheen, as if the metal itself was regenerating. And then they saw it. In the center of the cargo bay, where the thermal signature was strongest, was a single massive container unlike any other. It was a deep, obsidian black, devoid of any markings or serial numbers. It didn't look like steel. It looked like a solid block of something impossibly dense, almost absorbing the faint light around it. And from its surface, barely perceptible in the dimness, a faint, almost imperceptible pulse of light emanated, synchronized with the deep thrumming they now felt vibrating through the deck plates. Jessica gasped, pointing her analyzer at the black container. The carrier wave. It's emanating directly from that. And the modulations, they're incredibly intricate. It's like a Rosetta Stone of impossible data. David moved closer, his thermal imager showing the container glowing with an intense, internal heat. It's not just warm, Michael. It's hot. But it's not burning anything. It's contained, self-generating. And look at the surrounding metal. It's like the ship's structure is being drawn to it, or altered by it. The metal around this container, it's changing. It's becoming denser, smoother, almost seamless. Like the ship is reorganizing itself around this central point. Emily approached the container cautiously, her hand hovering inches from its dark surface. This isn't just a container, Michael. This is the heart. This is what caused the energy surge. This is what's been broadcasting. And it's not just influencing the ship. I think it's becoming the ship. Or rather, the ship is becoming an extension of it. This isn't just a mystery we're investigating. We've found the source of the unraveling. And it's still active. It's growing. Michael stared at the black, pulsing monolith, a terrifying realization dawning on him. The Orion's call wasn't just a ghost ship. It was a cocoon. And whatever was inside that impossible container, whatever was transforming the very fabric of the vessel, was now reaching the final stages of its metamorphosis. The ship had arrived in port with no crew, yes, but it was no longer empty. It was becoming occupied, and they were standing directly in its path. And they were standing directly in its path. The air itself seemed to thicken, pressing down on them with a palpable, unseen weight. The rhythmic pulse that had been a subtle hum, a deep vibration beneath their feet, now resonated through the deck plates, a guttural thrumming that vibrated in their bones, a sound that felt both ancient and sickeningly biological. It was the beat of a monstrous heart, and they were caught within its ribs. Michael, his eyes wide with a terror he'd never known, saw it first. From the pulsating, obsidian mass along the bulkheads, tendrils began to uncoil. They weren't like vines, or even the familiar organic growth they had encountered before. These were thick, slick, and muscular, coiling and straightening with an unnerving grace, their tips probing the air, seeking sensing. Jessica gasped, stumbling back into David, who instinctively put an arm out to steady her, his own face a mask of disbelief. Emily clutched Captain Miller's arm, her knuckles white, her breath catching in her throat. "What? What is that?" Emily whispered, her voice barely a breath, lost in the escalating thrum. Captain Miller, usually stoic and unshakable, looked utterly lost, his gaze fixed on the emerging horror. "It's alive. And it's forming." The tendrils weren't the only thing. From within the darkest recesses where the growth was thickest, where the shadows clung like shrouds, shapes began to coalesce. Not quite humanoid, not quite insectoid, but something horrifyingly in between. They were constructs of the black iridescent material, vaguely bipedal, with multiple limbs that seemed to shift and reconfigure as they solidified. They had no discernible faces, just a smooth, featureless sheen that reflected the emergency lights in distorted liquid smears. They were the ship's new inhabitants, its new crew, and they were waking up. They moved with an unnatural, silent fluidity, a gliding motion that sent a fresh wave of ice-cold fear down Michael's spine. These weren't creatures in the traditional sense. They were extensions, manifestations of the ship's new, terrifying will. They were the ship itself made flesh. "Run!" Michael yelled, his voice cracking, barely audible above the escalating thrum. "Everybody run! Get out of here!" They turned as one, scrambling back towards the hatch they had entered through. But as they reached it, the metallic door, previously a sturdy barrier, was now coated in the same black growth, pulsing with an inner light. Before their eyes, the growth sealed the seams, welding the door shut with organic matter, like a wound closing. A collective gasp of horror escaped their lips. They were trapped. The constructs, slow but deliberate, began to close in, their movement accompanied by a faint, wet shushing sound, like something dragging itself across a slick surface. The air grew heavy with a cloying metallic sweet scent, like ozone and something else, something indescribably alien, a scent of burgeoning life and inevitable decay. "It's blocking us," Jessica breathed, her voice filled with despair, her eyes darting frantically around the increasingly constricted space. "The ship is blocking us." David slammed his fist against the sealed hatch, but his hand slipped on the slick, warm material. "It's not just growing, it's responding. It knows we're here." Captain Miller, shaking off his initial shock, pointed his flashlight towards a narrow service tunnel vent high on the wall, partially obscured by the growth but still open. "Up there. It's small, but it might lead to a maintenance shaft. It's our only way out." Michael, being the most agile, was the first to scale the now textured wall, finding purchase in the rough organic protrusions. He pulled himself up, then reached down, his hand trembling, to help Jessica. David quickly followed, then Emily, and finally, with a grunt of effort, Captain Miller. The constructs below seemed to hesitate, their formless heads tilting, as if assessing the situation, their movements momentarily stalled by their prey's unexpected escape. The vent was cramped, dark, and hot, filled with the same sickly sweet air that now seemed to cling to their skin. They crawled, pushing past more fibrous growths that choked the passage, scraping against the metallic edges now softened and covered by the pervasive material. The thrumming of the ship intensified, echoing through the confined space, disorienting them, making it impossible to tell which way was up or down. "Where are we going?" Emily whispered, her voice tight with fear, the sound muffled by the enclosed space. "Just away from them," Michael responded, pushing forward, his knees aching. "Anywhere but here." They emerged, gasping for breath, into a larger vertical shaft, a dizzying tangle of pipes and conduits, many now encased in the black material, pulsing faintly. The shaft ascended several decks, disappearing into the darkness above. "This is the main utility shaft," Captain Miller said, pointing his flashlight upwards, his voice regaining a semblance of its usual authority. "It should lead to the bridge, or at least the upper decks. It's our best chance to get off this thing." But as they looked up, their hopes plummeted. The shaft wasn't empty. More of the black, tendril-like appendages snaked down from above, slowly, deliberately, as if searching. The ship was actively hunting them, not just containing them. It was a living, breathing labyrinth, and they were caught in its digestive tract. As they climbed, dodging the encroaching tendrils that seemed to anticipate their movements, they noticed something peculiar. The growth seemed to be thinner in certain areas, almost as if it was drawing sustenance from something else, as if it had a focal point. They reached a junction where the main shaft branched off into a smaller, almost forgotten-looking passage. Unlike the main shaft, this passage was eerily silent, the thrumming barely audible, a faint, distant echo. It was a pocket of unnatural calm in the storm of biological horror. "This way," David urged, pointing his own light down the passage, sensing a change. "The growth isn't as dense here. Maybe it's a dead end for them." They squeezed through the narrow opening, finding themselves in what looked like an old, rarely used storage room. But it wasn't storage anymore. The room was mostly clear of the dense, black growth, save for a few delicate, almost transparent filaments that snaked across the floor and up the walls. In the very center of the room, encased in a shimmering, almost crystalline form of the black material, was a chamber. It pulsed with an inner, soft, violet light, illuminating the space with an otherworldly glow. And within that light, suspended as if in amniotic fluid, was what appeared to be a single, intricate, almost impossibly beautiful sphere. It was about the size of a bowling ball, made of a material that seemed to absorb and emit light simultaneously, a swirling vortex of deep blues and purples. It hummed with an unheard frequency that vibrated directly in their consciousness, and from its surface, delicate, almost invisible filaments extended, embedding themselves into the surrounding organic mass, feeding the growth they had just escaped. "The source," Jessica breathed, mesmerized despite her fear, her voice hushed with awe and dread. "This is where it all began." Captain Miller approached cautiously, his flashlight beam trembling slightly, casting dancing shadows. "It's not just a growth, is it? It's a new life form. And the ship is its host." Michael felt a cold, crushing dread settle in his stomach, heavier than any fear he'd known. "And those things, the crew, they're just its antibodies, its extensions, protecting the core." Emily pointed to a faint, almost invisible etching on the surface of the crystalline casing around the sphere. It looked like a symbol, ancient and alien, yet eerily familiar, stirring something primal in their minds. "I've seen something like that before," Jessica said, her voice strained, her eyes fixated on the symbol. "In old nautical texts, myths of the deep, a symbol associated with the Leviathan's seed." David scoffed, though his voice lacked conviction. "Leviathan's seed? You're serious? That's just a legend." "It was said to be a relic, a living artifact from the abyssal depths, capable of consuming and transforming anything it touched," Jessica explained, her eyes still fixed on the pulsating sphere. "A legend, yes, but one that spoke of unimaginable power, something that could bring life and destruction in equal measure." Captain Miller's face was grim, etched with a new profound understanding of their predicament. "If it's consuming and transforming the ship, what happens when it runs out of material here? What happens when it reaches port, still growing, still consuming?" The implication hung heavy in the air, chilling them to the bone. The ship wasn't just a vessel anymore. It was a cocoon, a nursery, and soon perhaps a weapon. The occupants weren't just defending, they were preparing for something far more catastrophic than a mere deserted ship. "We can't let this leave the ship," Michael declared, his voice firm, overcoming his fear with a surge of desperate resolve. "We have to stop it. We have to destroy that core." A low guttural thrumming began to emanate from the walls of the storage room, slowly intensifying. The light from the sphere flickered, as if in direct response to Michael's declaration, its violet glow pulsing with a sudden, aggressive intensity. The organic material on the walls began to ripple, and the faint outlines of the constructs started to press against the fibrous mass, attempting to break through the thin barrier. They had been found. The ship, the Leviathan's seed, was now fully aware of their presence and their intent. "Easier said than done," David muttered, pulling out his multi-tool, a futile gesture against such a threat, his eyes wide with the enormity of their task. "How do you destroy something that's literally alive and taking over an entire ship?" The air grew colder and a new sharp, almost metallic tang joined the sickly sweet scent, like blood on steel. The violet light from the sphere flared, blinding them for a moment, and the tendrils outside began to pound against the walls with increased force. They were trapped with the very heart of the nightmare, and it was now fully aware of their presence, and it was fighting back. The control room of the Orion bucked violently. A sickening lurch sent Eris Thorne sprawling, his head narrowly missing a console. Elena Petrova, quicker on her feet, instinctively grabbed a stanchion, her knuckles white. The air shrieked with the protest of stressed metal, and the deep, resonant thrumming from the sphere intensified, echoing through the very hull of their vessel. It was no longer a passive hum. It was a furious, guttural growl. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing the room in an ominous red glow as primary power circuits struggled. Alarms blared, a cacophony of warnings about hull breaches, pressure fluctuations, and systems failures. Outside the viewport, the tendrils, once almost graceful in their exploration, now writhed with malevolent speed, smashing against the reinforced glass, leaving viscous trails of bioluminescent slime. Each impact was a jarring blow that reverberated through Eris's bones, a clear message of hostile intent. "It's trying to get in," Elena shouted over the din, her voice strained with a mix of terror and scientific awe. "It's targeting us." Eris pushed himself up, his heart hammering against his ribs. He stumbled towards the main console, his eyes fixed on the pulsating sphere within the Orion's cavernous hold. The light it emitted was no longer steady. It pulsed, brightened, and dimmed in erratic, violent bursts, mirroring the frantic assault outside. He could feel the pressure building, not just external, but an internal psychic weight pressing down on his mind. "It's reacting to our presence," Eris muttered, more to himself than Elena, his mind racing through possibilities even as raw fear gnawed at him. "It knows we're here. It knows we're a threat." A particularly powerful blow struck the viewport, spiderwebbing the reinforced glass. Elena cried out, shielding her face. Outside, the tendrils seemed to coil and retract, then strike again with renewed ferocity, like monstrous battering rams. The Orion, designed for deep-sea exploration, was not built for a direct assault from an entity of unknown, immense power. Eris's gaze sharpened. The sphere. He had to understand its function, its purpose, its weakness. Its erratic pulsing wasn't random. He saw patterns, faint, almost subliminal, in the way its energy flared, directly preceding the tendrils' strikes. It was a command center, a brain orchestrating the attack. But why? What had they done to provoke such a violent response? "The data!" Elena suddenly yelled, pointing a trembling finger at one of the auxiliary screens that still glowed faintly. "The energy fluctuations we detected when it first appeared. They're spiking now exponentially." Eris glanced at the screen. She was right. The energy signature was off the charts, unlike anything he'd ever seen. It wasn't just a power source, it was broadcasting, receiving, processing. "It's not just dormant energy," Eris said, a chilling realization dawning on him. "It's an active intelligence. And it's communicating. Or perhaps, it's absorbing." He remembered the missing crew of the Orion, the ghost ship. He remembered the strange, almost hypnotic pull he'd felt earlier. What if this sphere wasn't just a natural phenomenon, but something far more sinister? What if it wasn't just capturing its victims, but integrating them, transforming them into part of its collective consciousness, its network of tendrils? The thought sent a cold dread through him that surpassed even the immediate danger. "The crew," Elena whispered, her eyes wide with horror, as if she'd followed his train of thought. "They didn't just disappear. They became part of it." The possibility was grotesque, terrifying. The tendrils outside, then, were not just extensions of a creature, but perhaps extensions of many creatures, many consciousnesses, all bound to this central malevolent core. And now Eris and Elena were next. A warning siren blared louder than the rest. "Hull integrity compromised. Section 3B. We can't just sit here, Eris," Elena yelled, pulling him back from the abyss of his horrifying deductions. "The Orion won't hold." He looked at her, then back at the sphere, then at the rapidly failing systems around them. Escape was no longer an option. The tendrils had completely enveloped the Orion, pinning it against the seabed, slowly but surely tearing it apart. They were trapped, caught in the web of a colossal, ancient predator. "We have to stop it," Eris said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. "We can't let it continue. Not here. Not with what it's capable of." "Stop it how?" Elena retorted, desperation creeping into her tone. "We don't even know what it is. We don't have weapons against that." She gestured wildly at the pulsing sphere. Eris's eyes scanned the console, his mind frantically sifting through all the data they had collected, all the scientific principles he knew. There had to be a way. Every complex system, no matter how alien, had a fundamental operating principle, a source of its power, a point of vulnerability. "It's a massive energy signature," Eris mused aloud, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. "And it's generating an incredibly complex resonant frequency. That's how it controls the tendrils, how it expands its influence." "Like a super-powerful biological EMP?" Elena suggested, catching on. "More than that," Eris corrected. "It's a bioelectrical psionic resonance. It's not just transmitting. It's shaping the environment, influencing matter at a fundamental level. That's why the water behaves so strangely, why the tendrils are so responsive. So, if we disrupt that resonance, Elena began, a spark of dangerous hope in her eyes. We might be able to destabilize it, Eris finished, the idea taking root. Overload its core frequency, blind it, cripple its control. But how? The Orion S systems were designed for data collection, not for launching a counterattack against an unknown, sentient entity. Our energy projectors, Elena suddenly said, pointing to a schematic on a flickering screen. The ones we use for deep-sea seismic mapping and localized energy field studies. They're powerful. They can emit focused bursts of various frequencies. Eris's eyes lit up with a dangerous gleam. Yes, if we can calibrate them to match and then reverse the phase of its primary resonant frequency, essentially cancel it out, or even better, amplify its own output back onto itself in a destructive feedback loop. It's incredibly risky, Elena warned, her voice tight. We'd be aiming a massive energy pulse directly at its core. If we miss, or if it adapts, it could turn those projectors against us, or simply ignore them and tear us apart faster. We don't have another choice, Elena, Eris said, his gaze firm. The Orion is failing. We're trapped. This is our only shot. We either try to fight, or we become part of it. The unspoken horror of that fate spurred them both. They began to work with a frantic, desperate urgency. Elena, with her engineering expertise, began rerouting power to the deep-sea projectors, bypassing failing systems, coaxing life out of dying circuits. Eris, his mind a whirlwind of physics and biology, worked to analyze the sphere's fluctuating energy signature, trying to pinpoint the exact frequency and phase they needed to target. The Orion continued to groan and shudder around them. Lights flickered more violently, plunging them into momentary darkness before the emergency power kicked back in. The tendrils outside hammered relentlessly, and the reinforced viewport began to show deeper cracks, tiny fissures spreading like malevolent veins. They could hear the sickening sound of metal tearing in other sections of the ship. It's accelerating its attack, Elena grunted, her face streaked with sweat as she wrestled with the stubborn control panel. It senses what we're doing. It's trying to stop us. Then we have to be faster, Eris replied, his fingers flying across his own console, inputting complex algorithms, cross-referencing data points. We need to hit it hard, and we need to hit it now. The sphere, as if in response, pulsed with a blinding flash, a wave of raw energy that slammed into the Orion, causing every loose object to rattle violently and sending a painful jolt through their teeth. The tendrils outside went into a frenzied dance, striking the ship with a coordinated, devastating rhythm. Almost there, Eris, Elena yelled, her voice hoarse, as she finally secured the last power conduit. Projectors are online, but they're drawing maximum power. We'll have about 30 seconds of sustained output before the Orion S core reactor overloads. 30 seconds. 30 seconds to confront an ancient, intelligent horror that had likely existed for millennia, consuming everything in its path. 30 seconds to save themselves and perhaps to prevent this nightmare from ever reaching the surface world. Eris had the target frequency. He had the phase. He had the theoretical amplitude. All that remained was to unleash it. He looked at Elena, her face grim, determined. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the desperate resolve. "Ready, Elena," Eris said, his voice barely a whisper, yet infused with an iron will. "Initiate firing sequence on my mark." He placed his hand on the activation panel, his thumb hovering over the button that would either save them or condemn them to an unimaginable fate. Outside, the Orion screamed its death throes, and the tendrils pounded, ever closer to breaching their final sanctuary. The sphere pulsed, a furious, living heart of pure terror. The final confrontation was upon them. The final confrontation was upon them. The air in the core chamber grew thick, not with smoke, but with a palpable dread that twisted the very fabric of their sanity. The tendrils, like monstrous roots, began to force their way through the weakened bulkhead, splintering metal and showering sparks. Each crack was a hammer blow against Michael's heart, each splinter a shard of their dwindling hope. The Orion groaned, a dying beast, its structure tearing apart around them. Emily, her face a mask of horrified fascination, pointed a trembling finger at the pulsating sphere. It's not just energy. It's communicating. Jessica, frantically tapping at her tablet, brought up a complex waveform. It's a resonance frequency, a massive, complex data stream, but it's not digital. It's consciousness. Her voice was barely a whisper, laced with a terror that transcended the physical threat. The crew, Michael. They're not gone. They're here, inside this thing. It's absorbing them. A tendril, thicker than a man's torso, finally tore through the last layer of steel, spraying them with hydraulic fluid and superheated steam. David, with a roar of pure defiance, brought his axe down, but it merely embedded itself in the rubbery, chitinous surface, drawing a viscous phosphorescent green fluid that hissed on the floor. The tendril recoiled, then lashed out, knocking David against the wall with sickening force. "It's a collective," Emily gasped, her eyes wide with the horrifying realization. It's not just taking their minds, it's synthesizing them. It's growing, evolving with every new consciousness it absorbs. The Orion isn't just a host, it's a cocoon, and it's drawing all the ship's power to fuel its metamorphosis. Jessica's fingers flew across her console, her eyes scanning rapidly scrolling data. She's right, Michael. The main reactor. It's being drained at an impossible rate. It's going critical. If we don't stop it, the entire ship will detonate, and whatever this is will scatter across the ocean, across the world. How do we stop it? Michael demanded, pulling David to his feet, who was groaning but still conscious. The reactor, Jessica replied, her voice strained. We have to sever its connection, overload it, or initiate an emergency purge. But the controls for the core jettison are on the deck above in the auxiliary engine room. It's a suicide run. Captain Miller, who had been standing silent, his face grim, stepped forward. I know the ship, son. Every pipe, every valve. I can get there. I can initiate the manual override for the core purge. It'll blow the reactor clear of the ship, but the Orion, she won't survive it. His eyes, usually so steady, now held a deep melancholic resolve. It's a mercy for her. And for us. No, Captain, it's too dangerous. Michael protested, but Miller was already moving towards the shattered bulkhead. Someone has to do it, Michael. This ship. She's been my home for 30 years. I won't let her become a tomb for the world. With a final sorrowful look, Captain Miller squeezed through the pulsing tendrils and disappeared into the darkness of the breached corridor. Jessica, can you remotely trigger it from here? Michael yelled over the din of the screaming ship and the pounding tendrils trying to force their way further into the chamber. I need a direct conduit to the emergency override, and it's heavily shielded, Jessica replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. It'll take everything I have, and I still might not get through the fail-safes in time. And if I fail, the reactor just melts down, taking us all with it. Another tendril burst through, this one directly above them, dripping the phosphorescent green fluid. It pulsed, seeking, tasting the air. David, despite his injuries, grabbed a discarded wrench and swung it with desperate fury, creating a temporary distraction. Emily, anything else? Anything that can buy us time? Michael asked, drawing his own knife, knowing it was utterly useless against this monstrosity. Emily's eyes were locked on the sphere, her mind racing. It's feeding on order, on coherent thought. Maybe if we disrupt its input, overwhelm it with chaos. Chaos. Michael repeated, dumbfounded. Noise. Emily cried, her voice rising in pitch. It's processing consciousness. What if we flood it with something it can't process? Something utterly discordant. Jessica, overhearing, suddenly slammed her hand on the console. The ship's emergency distress beacon. It's an ultra-frequency burst, designed to cut through interference. If I could reroute its power, amplify it, and broadcast it into the sphere's resonance frequency, it might create a feedback loop. A neural overload. Do it, Michael shouted, pushing David back as another tendril snaked towards them. It'll fry this console, and probably everything else on this deck. Jessica warned, her fingers already flying. It's a massive energy surge, completely unregulated. We don't have a choice. Michael yelled back, parrying a tendril with a desperate thrust of his knife, the blade scraping uselessly against its tough hide. The tendrils were now pouring into the chamber, writhing like a nest of vipers, their tips probing, seeking. David, bloodied but unbowed, tried to hold the line, but they were too numerous, too powerful. One tendril wrapped around his leg, pulling him towards the pulsating sphere. Jessica, now! Emily screamed as the sphere seemed to brighten. its pulses growing more rapid, more aggressive. It was reacting to their presence, to their fear, to their minds. Jessica slammed her hand down on a final, glowing button. There was a deafening shriek, not from the ship, but from the console itself, as circuits overloaded and burst into flame. A blinding flash of pure, white light erupted from the sphere, accompanied by a sound that was not a sound, but a tearing sensation in their very minds. It was the collective scream of a million thoughts, compressed, distorted, agonizingly unraveling. The tendrils froze, then thrashed violently, retracting as if burned. The sphere itself began to flicker, its furious pulse stuttering, weakening. The light faded, replaced by an eerie, sickly green glow that pulsed erratically. "It's working!" Emily cried, shielding her eyes. "It's overloading. It can't process the chaos." But the victory was short-lived. The ship, already mortally wounded, gave a final agonizing lurch. A klaxon blared, a deep guttural sound that echoed through the dying vessel. "That's the core jettison alarm," Jessica yelled, her face pale. "Captain Miller! He did it! He manually initiated the purge." The floor beneath them bucked violently. The sphere, now glowing a dull, unstable red, began to retract, pulling itself back into the ship's core, shrinking, shriveling, as if being drained of its very essence. The tendrils, no longer animated, collapsed like deflated balloons. "We have to go. Now!" Michael screamed, grabbing Jessica and pulling her towards the emergency escape hatch they had spotted earlier, now barely visible through the smoke and debris. David, limping, followed close behind. They scrambled through the narrow passage, the ship groaning and tearing itself apart around them. Water began to flood the lower decks, rising rapidly. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone, burning metal, and something else, something alien and acrid. They burst onto the main deck, gasping for breath, just as the Orion astern began to dip alarmingly into the churning waves. The main mast, already listing, snapped with a thunderous crack, sending ropes and debris flying. "The lifeboat!" David shouted, pointing to the last remaining, partially damaged escape pod still clinging to its davits. With no time to spare, they clambered inside, Michael frantically fumbling with the release mechanism. The ship listed further, water washing over the deck, threatening to drag them down with it. "Come on! Come on!" Jessica pleaded, her eyes wide with terror as the Orion's bow rose into the sky, revealing the gaping, mangled wound where the core chamber had been. The sphere was gone, either jettisoned with the core or consumed by the backlash. With a final desperate wrench, Michael released the pod. It splashed into the frigid Atlantic just as the Orion, with a mournful final sigh of twisting metal and rushing water, plunged beneath the waves. The massive ship disappeared into the depths, leaving behind only a swirling vortex of foam and debris. They drifted in silence, the tiny lifeboat a fragile speck on the vast, indifferent ocean. The sun, a cold, distant eye, began its slow ascent, painting the sky with hues of bruised purple and blood orange. The horror of the night slowly gave way to the chilling reality of what they had witnessed. Captain Miller was gone. His sacrifice, a silent testament to courage in the face of the unimaginable. The Orion was gone, and with it, the monstrous entity that had consumed its crew and threatened to consume them all. Days later, they were rescued by a passing freighter, half dead from exposure and dehydration. Their story, of course, was met with disbelief. A rogue wave, a structural failure, mass hallucination due to trauma. The explanations were varied, mundane, and entirely inadequate. They spoke of Captain Miller's heroism, of the Orion's sudden tragic demise, but they kept the true horror locked away, a secret burden too terrible to share. Michael, Jessica, David, and Emily returned to their lives irrevocably changed. They carried the memory of the pulsating sphere, the writhing tendrils, and the chilling realization that humanity was not alone, nor was it at the top of the food chain. The missing crew of the Orion were not just lost at sea. They were integrated, their consciousnesses a part of something vast, ancient, and utterly alien. Sometimes at night, Michael would stare up at the stars, a cold dread coiling in his stomach. He knew with an absolute certainty that out there in the silent, unfathomable darkness were things that defied human understanding, things that saw life not as precious but as fuel. The Orion had merely been an unlucky encounter, a brief, terrifying glimpse behind the veil. And as the vastness of the cosmos stretched before him, he couldn't shake the terrifying thought. What if the entity they had encountered was not an anomaly, but merely one ripple in an ocean of unimaginable horrors, patiently waiting for its next vessel, its next meal in the endless silent void? The ship that arrived in port with no crew had taken its secret to the grave, but the chilling implications of its final voyage echoed in their minds, a silent scream across the empty ocean, a warning that the universe was far stranger and far more terrifying than they could ever possibly comprehend.